quirks, the good and the bad. This year, he'd invited his childhood friend, Mark. Mark and David go way back, practically brothers. I'd met Mark a few times over the years, mostly at weddings or the occasional guys' night out, but I never really got to know him. He always struck me as a bit reserved, maybe even a little sad around the edges. A successful architect, divorced, lives alone in a modern apartment in the city. The picture of a man who had it all, but maybe not what he really wanted. The lake house is my sanctuary. Big windows overlooking the water, a wrap-around porch perfect for sipping coffee in the morning, and the kind of quiet that soothes your soul. This year, though, the quiet felt different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Mark arrived late Friday afternoon, and I greeted him with a hug, as usual. "Mark, good to see you. David's already out on the boat with the boys, but come on in, make yourself at home. I've got some iced tea chilling in the fridge." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thanks, Sarah. It's good to be here. Looks like you've created quite the haven." "We try," I said, leading him inside. He ran his hand along the smooth wooden banister of the staircase, and I noticed something I hadn't before. His hands were elegant, artistic. Strange the things you notice. That first evening was typical family gathering fare. We ate burgers and hot dogs. The kids put on a chaotic talent show, mostly involving belching and cartwheels, and David and Mark reminisced about their glory days playing high school football. I mostly stayed on the periphery, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink, refereeing the kids' squabbles, and listening to my sister-in-law complain about her latest diet. But even amidst the chaos, I was aware of Mark. He wasn't loud or boisterous like the other men. He mostly observed, listened. And when he did speak, it was thoughtful, insightful. He asked me about my garden, something David never paid much attention to, and actually seemed interested in my rambling explanation of the different varieties of heirloom tomatoes I was growing. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself on the porch, staring out at the moonlit lake. The water was still, reflecting the moonlight like a shimmering mirror. I was just about to head inside when I heard footsteps behind me. "Couldn't sleep?" It was Mark. "Just enjoying the peace and quiet," I said, gesturing to the lake. "You?" He leaned against the railing beside me. "Same. The city can get a bit overwhelming sometimes." We stood in silence for a few moments, just listening to the crickets chirping and the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. It was a comfortable silence, not awkward or strained. Then he said something that surprised me. "You know, Sarah, you've built a beautiful life here. David's a lucky man." I chuckled. He has his moments. He turned to face me, his eyes serious in the moonlight. "No, I mean it. You radiate warmth, Sarah. You make this place feel alive." I didn't know what to say. I'd never thought of myself that way before. I was just me, a wife, a mother, a gardener. "Thank you, Mark. That's very kind of you to say." He smiled again, that genuine smile that made my heart flutter just a little bit. It's the truth. And that was it. That was the first crack in the dam. A simple compliment, a moment of unexpected connection. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of something. Well, shocking. Something that would change everything. The next morning, I woke up with Mark's words still echoing in my mind. "You radiate warmth. You make this place feel alive." I brushed it off as simple politeness, a friend being kind, but the seed of curiosity had been planted. The day unfolded much like the previous one. Sun, swimming, laughter, and the constant buzz of family activity. But now my awareness of Mark was heightened. I noticed the way he watched me, the way he listened when I spoke, the subtle smiles that seemed directed only at me. It was all very subtle, almost imperceptible, but I felt it. A current of something unspoken flowing between us. Around lunchtime, David asked Mark to help him set up the volleyball net. As they wrestled with the poles and the net, I found myself watching them, observing their dynamic. David, always the jovial one, slapping Mark on the back, ribbing him about his city life. Mark, quiet and patient, offering practical solutions to their tangled predicament. They were such different men, yet bound by a deep, enduring friendship. Later that afternoon, the kids were clamoring for ice cream, so I offered to take them into town. Mark volunteered to come along, ostensibly to stretch his legs. As we drove, the kids chattered excitedly about their favorite flavors, but I couldn't help but notice Mark's gaze in the rearview mirror. He wasn't staring, but his eyes kept drifting to mine, a silent acknowledgement of something shared. The ice cream parlor was packed, and the line snaked out the door. While the kids argued over sprinkles, Mark and I stood in a corner, out of the immediate fray. "So," he said, leaning against the wall, "how do you really feel about these family gatherings?" I laughed. "Don't tell David, but sometimes they're a bit much. A week of non-stop noise and chaos can be draining." "I can imagine," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You seem to carry the weight of it all on your shoulders." "It's just what I do," I said, shrugging. "Someone has to keep things running smoothly." "But do you ever do anything for yourself?" he asked, his voice soft. His question caught me off guard. I thought about my garden, my occasional book club meetings, but those felt more like obligations than true acts of self-care. "Not really, I guess." He nodded slowly, his gaze intense. "You deserve more, Sarah." The line moved forward, and our conversation was interrupted by the kids' impatient demands for their ice cream. But his words hung in the air, a challenge to the life I had so readily accepted. That evening, after the kids were finally asleep, David and Mark settled in for a game of poker with my brother and my uncle. I retreated to the porch, seeking solace in the quiet darkness. I felt restless, uneasy. Mark's words had stirred something within me, a longing for something more than the predictable routine of my life. I heard the screen door creak open, and I knew it was him before I even turned around. "Poker game get too intense?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He shook his head. "Just needed some air." He paused, then added, "Can I sit with you?" I nodded, and he settled into the chair beside me. The silence stretched out between us, thick with unspoken feelings. Finally, he broke the silence. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and hesitant, "I need to tell you something." My heart pounded in my chest. I knew, somehow, what he was going to say. Or at least I had a pretty good idea. And a part of me, a part I hadn't even known existed until now, was desperate to hear it. He started, then stopped, as if searching for the right words. "I've always admired you, Sarah, even before this weekend. I see how much you give, how much you sacrifice. And I think you're incredible." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a vulnerability I had never seen before. And in that moment, I knew that this wasn't just about polite admiration. This was something deeper, something more profound, something dangerous. The air crackled with tension. I should have told him to stop, to go back inside, to forget everything he just said. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I just looked back at him, my heart pounding, waiting to see what he would say next. The lake house, usually a place of peace, now felt like the epicenter of an emotional earthquake. He reached out, his hand hovering just above mine. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. His fingers brushed against mine, sending a jolt of electricity through my arm. He took my hand, his touch gentle yet firm. His hand was warm, calloused in a way David's never had been, a craftsman's hand. It felt good. "I know this is probably wrong," he said, his gaze fixed on our intertwined hands. "I know David is my best friend, but I can't help how I feel. And I needed you to know." Tears welled up in my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of confusion, of longing, of guilt. "Mark," I whispered, "this is. I don't know what this is." "I don't either," he admitted. "But I feel a connection with you, Sarah. A connection I haven't felt with anyone in a very long time." We sat in silence again, our hands still clasped together. The only sound was the chirping of crickets and the distant laughter from the poker game inside. It felt like we were the only two people in the world. Then he did something I never expected. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. "Can I kiss you, Sarah?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. My mind raced. This was insane. This was wrong. This could destroy everything. But a part of me, the part that had been dormant for so long, the part that craved attention and affection and something more, was screaming yes. I closed my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. His lips met mine, softly at first, then with increasing intensity. It wasn't a passionate, lustful kiss. It was a tender, searching kiss. A kiss that spoke of loneliness, of longing, of a shared understanding of something missing in our lives. I kissed him back. I know, it was wrong. So wrong. But in that moment, I didn't care. I was lost in the feeling of his lips on mine, the warmth of his hand in mine, the connection that seemed to transcend everything else. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice filled with remorse. "I shouldn't have done that." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was too overwhelmed with emotions. He stood up. "I'm going to go inside," he said. "I'll see you in the morning." He turned and walked back towards the house, leaving me alone on the porch, reeling from what had just happened. I sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of it all. How had this happened? How had I let it happen? I was a married woman, a wife, a mother. I didn't do things like this, but I had. And now, I had to face the consequences. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had been hit by a truck. I avoided Mark all morning, busying myself with chores and trying to act normal around David and the kids. But I could feel Mark's eyes on me, watching me, waiting for me to acknowledge what had happened. Finally, after lunch, I cornered him as he was heading down to the dock. "Mark, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. He stopped and turned to face me, his expression somber. "I know." We walked down to the end of the dock and sat down, our feet dangling over the edge. The lake sparkled in the sunlight, but I couldn't appreciate its beauty. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed. "I don't know, Sarah. I truly don't." "We can't tell David," I said. "It will destroy him." "I know," he said. "I would never want to hurt him like that." "So what? We just pretend it never happened." He looked at me, his eyes filled with sadness. "I wish we could. But I don't think we can. Not really." "Then what?" I asked, my voice rising in desperation. "What's the answer, Mark?" He reached out and took my hand again. "I don't have an answer, Sarah, but I promise you we'll figure it out. Together." His words were both comforting and terrifying. I knew that whatever happened, my life would never be the same. The quiet lake house, once a symbol of peace and tranquility, had become the stage for a drama that could shatter everything I held dear. The shock of what happened resonated, and I knew things had changed forever. The rest of the weekend was a blur. I avoided being alone with Mark as much as possible, clinging to David and the kids like a lifeline. I laughed at his jokes. I hugged him tight. I tried to reassure myself that everything was normal, that I was still the same woman I had been before Mark's confession. But I wasn't. I knew too much. I had felt too much. Mark, for his part, was subdued. He helped with the chores, played with the kids, and engaged in polite conversation with the other adults, but he kept his distance from me. I could feel his eyes on me, though, filled with a mixture of longing and regret. Finally, Sunday afternoon arrived, and it was time for Mark to leave. I stood on the porch, watching as he packed his car. David walked over to shake his hand. "Thanks for coming, buddy," David said, clapping him on the back. "It was good to have you." "Thanks for having me," Mark said, his voice strained. He looked at me, his eyes conveying a silent message of goodbye and something more, something unresolved. He got into his car and drove away, leaving me standing on the porch, feeling more confused and conflicted than ever. The week that followed was agonizing. I couldn't stop thinking about Mark, about his words, about his kiss. I replayed the events of the weekend in my head over and over again, trying to understand what had happened and what it all meant. I found myself comparing Mark to David. David was comfortable, familiar, safe. He was the man I had built a life with, the father of my children. But he was also predictable, sometimes even a little boring. He took me for granted, assuming that I would always be there, taking care of everything. Mark, on the other hand, was exciting, unpredictable, and dangerous. He saw me, really saw me, in a way that David hadn't in years. He made me feel alive, vibrant, and desirable. But he was also a threat, a potential disruptor of the life I had so carefully constructed. One evening, I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when David came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You okay?" he asked, nuzzling my neck. "You seem a little distant lately." I stiffened. "I'm fine," I said, pulling away. "Just tired." He looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. "You sure? You haven't been yourself since the lake house." My heart pounded in my chest. "I said I'm fine, David," I snapped. "Leave me alone." He backed away, hurt and confused. I immediately regretted my outburst. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice softening. "I didn't mean to be so short with you. I'm just stressed." He sighed. "I know. I just want to help." I leaned into him, burying my face in his chest. "I know," I said, "and I appreciate it." But I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't tell him about Mark, about the kiss, about the feelings that were tearing me apart. It would destroy him, and I couldn't do that. A few weeks later, I received an email from Mark. "Sarah," it read, "I need to see you. Can we meet for coffee? Please." I hesitated for a long time before responding. I knew that seeing him would only complicate things further, but I couldn't resist the urge to hear what he had to say. "Okay," I wrote back, "but just coffee." We met at a small cafe in a town halfway between our homes. When I saw him, my heart skipped a beat. He looked tired, but his eyes still held that spark of something that drew me to him. We ordered our coffees and sat down at a table in the corner. The silence was thick with unspoken emotions. "So," I said, breaking the silence, "what did you want to talk about?" He took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, "about what happened at the lake house." "And?" I asked, bracing myself. "And I realized that I can't just walk away from this," he said. "I know it's complicated. I know it's wrong. But I can't deny how I feel about you, Sarah." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Mark, please don't do this," I said. "I can't leave David. I can't destroy my family." "I'm not asking you to," he said. "I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's something more for you out there. Something more than the life you're living now." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I know this isn't easy," he said, "but I believe that we deserve to be happy, and I believe that we could be happy together." I looked at him, my heart torn in two. A part of me wanted to run away with him, to escape the confines of my life and embrace the unknown. But another part of me, the responsible part, the loyal part, knew that I couldn't. I had a husband, children, a life to consider. "I don't know, Mark," I said, my voice trembling. "I just don't know." He squeezed my hand. "Take your time," he said. "Think about it. And if you decide that I'm not the right choice, I'll understand. But I had to tell you how I feel." We finished our coffees in silence. As we were leaving, he stopped me and kissed me, a quick, chaste kiss on the cheek. "I'll be waiting," he whispered. I drove home that day, my mind racing. I knew that I had a big decision to make, a decision that would change the course of my life forever. In the end, I chose David. I chose my family. I chose the comfort and security of the life I had built. It wasn't an easy decision, and there were times when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But I knew that I couldn't abandon my responsibilities, that I couldn't inflict that kind of pain on David and the kids. I never saw Mark again.